Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and as it's foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Super wet weather, California sinking, Russia and its involvement in fighting terrorists, more clashes in Jerusalem between Israelis and Palestinians, yet another school shooting, and President Obama's thoughts on the matter are just a few of the things that we're going to talk to you about on this episode. But we start our broadcast out with the flooding on the eastern border of the United States. The Carolinas has gotten some of the worst flooding on record. At least 19 deaths have been blamed on the floodwaters, along with 372 bridges and road closures, as well as 17 dam failures. Well, the water in those areas has risen so high, it's been filling not only basements, but attics as well.
In Andrews, South Carolina, a town about 100 miles southeast of Columbia, all you can see is the rooftops of two-story homes. Now, one woman, 72-year-old Shelby Upholston, lost everything that she worked for as over 4 feet of water has destroyed her home. Now, she, along with many others in that area, didn't have flood insurance since they didn't live in a flood zone. And Catan, that is an incredible amount of water that you see there. That's right. That's very sad.
Well, she said she'll have to use her life savings to rebuild over 50 years of accumulated memories. Now, as the South Carolina senator and a sheriff toured the destruction, they floated down Highway 41, which was under 16 feet of water. Wow. And at times they had to actually duck underneath power lines as they went down the road.
Well, residents are saving what they can to protect what items that haven't been damaged by the water. Well, most people are trying to keep positive, being thankful that they at least have their lives. Now, although there's more rain in the forecast, and the governor says that the flooding could continue for another 10 days.
Wow. Well, from all that rain on the East Coast to drought in California that has been taking its toll not only on the people but the land itself. Well, California is sinking, and in some places it's sinking at a rate of about 2 inches a month, according to a report released by NASA. In one place, the sinking is increasing the flood risk in an area that is desperate for water.
Johnny Andrews, a third-generation farmer, is struggling to keep his crops green during a record-breaking drought, and he's turning to what he calls a last resort, drilling for groundwater, a cost of about $200,000 per well, with a pumping cost of $2,500 to $3,500 per month per well.
Wow, that's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. All that groundwater pumping has its consequences, though. As the water is drawn up, the land sinks down, a scientific term called subsidence. Well, Michelle Sneed with the USGS has been studying land subsidence for 20 years, and she said she's never measured rates like this. What's taking place in California, it's absolutely extreme.
An area the size of Rhode Island, about 1,200 square miles, has been affected, and it is sunk permanently. Now, the only way to stop it, Sneed says, is to actually stopping the land from sinking is that the farmers are going to have to stop pumping the water out, but of course that isn't going to take place because they need that water.
That's right. Well, man-made canals, bridges, and roadways are all showing signs of subsidence. It's also damaging a vital part of California's flood control system, which is weakening levees, and with the threat, of course, of a wet winter ahead, there's a greater risk for flooding, affecting areas like schools, farmlands, highways, homes, etc. Nearly half the nation's fruits, vegetables, and nuts are produced in California. So that's another reason why they're not going to stop pumping that groundwater up.
You're definitely going to see the prices go up on those things as a result.
That's absolutely correct. So this, of course, will create a problem for the entire nation, not just one state.
Well, Flint, Michigan's water is not safe to drink. A plan to save the city money on its water is backfiring. The Michigan city disconnected from Detroit's water supply and started drawing water from the Flint River, a move that saved the city $15 million in annual fees.
Wow. But even after treatment of the water, it isn't safe to drink. Well, that's because chemicals used to treat the water was so corrosive that it actually peeled away lead from centuries-old pipes and sent it straight to the city's faucets, people, houses, residents, businesses, and so forth. And in some cases, researchers found elevated lead levels in children, sometimes 2 to 3 times the normal levels.
Now, the county declared a public health emergency. One pediatrician stated that there is no safe level of lead in someone's blood. Leanne Walters, the mother of 4-year-old twins, noticed mental and physical delays in her boys. The state public health workers just told her regarding her boys, it's just a few IQ points. It's not the end of the world.
Wow, sounds like no compassion there.
Yeah, how'd you like to be the mother hearing that?
Yeah, knowing what might lie ahead for your children. Well, with mounting complaints, there's a call for the government to help Flint draw its water once again from Detroit.
In the Belgium capital, there have been clashes and mass riots due to protests against the government's economic policies. Now, tens of thousands of Belgians took to the streets protesting the government's austerity measures. The rallies are part of the anti-austerity strike. Trade unions are angry at the government's budget cuts and tax policy adjustments, claiming that they have drastically reduced purchasing power.
That's right. The protests have been the largest since last November, and police fired tear gas at anti-austerity protesters who were attending those protests, somewhere upwards of 100,000 people at those protests.
Well, from riots in the streets of Europe to bombs destroying the streets in the Middle East, YPN's Larry McGee has our coverage on the ongoing war in Syria. Larry, what are the latest developments for us?
If the state-sanctioned activities of Russian bombers in Syria wasn't enough to raise American concerns, then Iraq, given serious consideration to allowing Russia to bomb within its borders, is sure to ruffle a few feathers. The Iraqi government is apparently not satisfied with the level of progress it has seen in its battle against ISIS, and the overwhelming military might being provided to a Syrian neighbor by Russia is starting to look more appealing by the day. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi confirmed that he is indeed considering the possibility of working with Russia. An actual fact, the minister said he would welcome such a move if it can work. Still, other Iraqi politicians have been even more candid. The head of Iraq's Parliamentary Defense and Security Committee, Hakeem al-Zamili, stated that Baghdad is seeking to see Russia have a bigger role in Iraq. Yes, definitely a bigger role than the Americans, he said. He continued that after a whole year, ISIS is still growing and thousands of fighters are still flowing to both Iraq and Syria, and it is controlling more areas. That, he said, is clear evidence that the United States has no clear plan or strategy. The State Department remains defiant, however, with the State Department spokesperson John Kirby stating that he hasn't seen an indication that Iraq is turning to Russia in this fight. U.S. opponents are then quick to refer to Minister al-Abadi's recently televised interview where he expressed that his expectation was that Iraq was going to receive major help from the West. When pressed by the interviewer as to whether or not he believed there was a lack of American political will to help, his response was yes. The sentiment seems to be shared by many throughout the Mideast who don't believe America has tried hard enough to eliminate ISIS. The Syrian ambassador went on record this week stating that, on the other hand, the Russian airstrikes have been highly efficient and accurate. The terrorists are on the run, falling backwards, he said, towards the Iraqi and Turkish border. The American coalition, he went on to say, who have no coordination with the Syrian military, have been landing their blows blindly. The American-led air campaign is actually being condemned by Russia as illegal, and it maintains that it will not join the Western coalition due to its illegality. Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova says that Russia has repeatedly stated that it is not against fighting ISIS together, but Moscow cannot join a coalition on the conditions on which it is currently based because they do not correspond to international law, and that was made clear. We refuse only one thing, she said, to participate in that which is illegal, and since there is no UN Security Council decision or consent from the capital of Damascus, we cannot partake in it. Meanwhile, Russian fighters have been engaged in strikes against terrorist targets in Syria since the past week, with its latest strike reportedly decimating as many as 12 targets so far. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, as you can see, Russia is definitely turning the tables in Syria there, adding a lot of support for Damascus and Assad's government, and the U.S. is definitely not pleased.
Yeah, well, that's going to create an even stronger division between those two superpowers. Well, violence continues to run rampant all over the Middle East. As we've been reporting, the ongoing violence in Israel has erupted again, causing the death of another Palestinian and injuring dozens more in the occupied territories of the West Bank. Protests are being held there over Israel settlers and armed forces provocations at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Several protesters have been arrested.
Now, a Palestinian boy was also injured when an Israeli military vehicle ran over him in the Beid El settlement near Ramallah. Now, earlier, 4 stabbing attacks in the occupied territories left 1 Palestinian dead and 6 others injured. Several Israelis were also wounded. Now, the wave of stabbing attacks against Israelis has been called a new intifada, or uprising by the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas.
Now, since the beginning of October, at least 8 Palestinians, mostly children, have been killed by Israeli forces. Casualties in the besieged Gaza Strip rise also as the Israeli forces brutally confront Palestinian protesters. Now, the surge in violence is due mainly to Israel preventing the entry of Muslims into the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex during visits by Israeli settlers and officials over the past 2 months.
Well, Saudi Arabia's deadly bombardment of Yemen continues despite growing concerns of a worsening humanitarian situation in the poorest Arab nation. Now, the latest attacks killed 3 civilians, 2 of them children, after warplanes targeted a house in the northern Sadr province. Now, fighter jets also pounded Tiez province, killing 2 other people.
Saudi warplanes also bombed a wedding ceremony in Donmar province. Yemeni officials say the death toll from the attack has now risen to 131, including 80 women, and dozens more were injured. Now, nearly 6,500 Yemeni have been killed since the beginning of the Saudi onslaught in March 26 of this year.
Wow. Well, on the ISIS front line, there is news of the Daesh terrorists killing a senior Iranian military advisor in northern Syria. According to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, Brigadier General Hussein Hamadani died outside the city of Aleppo.
While the exact circumstances of his death are unknown, Iran's foreign minister Mohammad Jabir Zarif called on the international community to prioritize the fight against Tikrit terrorists and to eradicate the inhuman and anti-Islam movement of Daesh.
The Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council vowed Daesh will be completely wiped out in revenge for killing of the Brigadier General.
Well, military sources, in Syria say that troops have launched a major ground offensive against the foreign-backed militants in the neighboring province of Idlib and Hama. Russia has said it is backing the ground offensive by airstrikes. Now, this is the first ground attack by Syrian troops since Russia began their airstrikes a week ago. The Russian Defense Ministry also says that its warships in the Caspian Sea have launched attacks against the positions of ISIL and al-Nusra fronts in Syria.
Just like what we heard from Larry's report there.
That's right.
Russia's continuing those airstrikes. Well, moving on from the war on terror in the Middle East to the war on terror in the United States, this time gun violence. Now, just 8 days after Umpqua Community College massacre took the lives of 10 people and injured 8 others, several more shootings in the same day at Texas and Arizona universities resulted in 2 more deaths and 4 people wounded.
Officials say the shooting in Flagstaff near a residence hall at Northern Arizona University was carried out by a college freshman who shot 4 people, killing 1. Gregory T. Fowler, chief of the campus police department, said the student, identified as Stephen Jones, an 18-year-old, opened fire after 2 groups of students were involved in a confrontation. Now, the police took Mr. Jones into custody after he stopped firing.
And not once, but twice, the sound of gunfire was heard in the courtyard of a student housing complex at Texas Southern University. Now, early in the morning, 1 young man was injured by gunfire, but was treated and released from a nearby hospital. Then, just before noon, more shots. This time, 1 man killed and another injured. Officials at the university suspect it may have been a retaliation shooting for the shooting that took place earlier in the day.
Oh, my. Students were evacuated from the complex and the school went on lockdown, causing classes to be canceled. Police officers continued their investigation late into the day, as this was the 3rd shooting to happen this week on the STU campus.
Wow, 3 shootings, 1 week, same campus.
Yeah, a place where people are going to learn, they're having to go in fear for their lives.
Wow. Well, parents and students alike were outraged and fearful. One mother responded concerning her own daughter's status at the school. "I don't feel safe with her staying here. Now she's coming home. She's not going to be on campus anymore. It's just ridiculous."
A student expressed his frustration, saying, "It's not what I bargained for. I came here to get an education, not to walk around with a bulletproof vest on." And after 3 shootings on this campus in a single week, students who just began their school year are worried about their safety more than they are their grades.
I can imagine. Well, the shootings appeared to be the 3rd and 4th on or near the campus since August. And although officials said 2 people had been detained, the suspect believed to be the gunman remains at large.
Well, prior to these most recent school shootings, President Obama spoke at a news conference regarding the Oregon campus shooting. He expressed his feelings of frustration and disgust that mass shootings like these continue to take place in the United States, and urged Americans that our thoughts and prayers are not enough. Let's take a look at an excerpt from the president's speech.
But as I said just a few months ago, and I said a few months before that, and I said each time we see one of these mass shootings, our thoughts and prayers are not enough. It's not enough. It does not capture the heartache and grief and anger that we should feel. And it does nothing to prevent this carnage from being inflicted someplace else in America. Next week, or a couple of months from now. We don't yet know why this individual did what he did. And it's fair to say that anybody who does this has a sickness in their minds, regardless of what they think their motivations may be. But we are not the only country on earth that has people with mental illnesses or want to do harm to other people. We are the only advanced country on earth that sees these kinds of mass shootings every few months. Earlier this year, I answered a question in an interview by saying, the United States of America is the one advanced nation on earth in which we do not have sufficient common sense gun safety laws, even in the face of repeated mass killings. And later that day, there was a mass shooting at a movie theater in Lafayette, Louisiana. That day. Somehow this has become routine. The reporting is routine. My response here at this podium ends up being routine. The conversation in the aftermath of it, we've become numb to this. We talked about this after Columbine and Blacksburg, after Tucson, after Newtown, after Aurora, after Charleston.
Well, you can definitely see President Obama has a lot of emotion there, not wanting to continue to see this taking place again and again in our country.
Yeah, definitely a cry for a peaceful solution coming from our nation's leader.
Absolutely. Well, President Obama is right. Our thoughts and our prayers are not enough. The world is crying out for the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, a program that is designed to heal this sickness in the mind and develop a character based on moral values. Listen to what our president is saying. Go to your state's representatives, local leaders, principals, guidance counselors, and teachers and tell them we need character education as a required curricula in our schools today. If we want to change our world, it's going to take a group effort. Contact the Peaceful Solution today and find out how you can order a set of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program materials and brochures so you can show your leaders how simple the answer to these school shootings really is. Now, you can visit the Peaceful Solution on their website at www.peacefulsolution.org, and for more information on how changing the hearts and minds will stop today's problems, contact the House of Yahweh. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisroelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also check out our new website, www.ypnnews.com, and to email the House of Yahweh, send your emails to info@yahweh.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, another inspiring and enlightening message from Yisroel Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.